Welcome to The Nation Speaks. I'm your host, Cindy Drucare. This is a special episode with a compilation of interviews we did at Turning Point USA Student Action Summit 2020 in West Palm Beach, Florida. Turning Point is the nation's largest grassroots conservative youth organization, with chapters in over 2,000 campuses. Their events bring together student activists, thought leaders in the conservative movement, and high-profile speakers like this year, Vice President Mike Pence. Here are some of the people we met, and be sure to tune in to our most recent episodes for more great conversations. Here at Turning Point USA 2020 Student Action Summit with Chris Miller. He is the Congress member for the Illinois 100th District.
Correct.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. This is awesome to see so many young patriots that are interested and fighting the good fight and standing up against socialism and all the things that are happening in America right now.
So I understand you're a farmer and you got involved in politics pretty late in life. What prompted that?
Yeah. Well, I have been a farmer. I farmed for almost 50 years, and I'm 66 years old, but what prompted me to get into politics was the latest 32% tax increase that we all had to do in the state of Illinois, and there was an open seat.
So it worked out well. So you've just won your second term, is that right?
Yes, I just won my second term. And so it's pretty interesting times. There's a small group of reformers in Illinois, and our coalition is building. We're up to about 10 conservatives in the Republican caucus right now. So it's pretty exciting that we're going to be working with CPI and the Freedom Caucus with our messaging, because Republicans have better idea. So it's just a matter of articulating those thoughts and getting those ideas out in public so the public can see them, because they should be bipartisan issues, especially in the state of Illinois, where our state is a disaster.
All right, well, let's hear, what are the key issues in your mind?
Well, the key issue in Illinois right now generally is our financial insolvency, and the Democrats continue to have no answers. All they want to do is tax more, borrow more, and spend more. And as we all know, that's been a disaster every place it's been tried.
And so what is your prescription there? What are you trying to push
Well,
forward?
I know one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to educate the public, because people are apathetic and indifferent, and they've been lulled to sleep into having a higher opinion of our elected officials and what they should have. And I know one of the things that I have discovered in my brief time in the General Assembly in Illinois is these guys need close adult supervision, because without that, they are just prone to do the wrong thing all the time. And it's like I tell people back home, is that everybody has an advocate in Springfield except for the taxpayer. And I know that that's been my resolve and commitment, is to be a voice for the taxpayers that are never heard or never considered, and I should rarely considered in any of the decision-making policies.
So, and how are those taxpayers faring right now under COVID?
Well, it's bad, because one thing that we see, at least in Illinois and probably even in other states, is the people that are making these decisions to hamper and chain small businesses have never missed a paycheck. Their government check has been there regularly all the time, and so they have no financial concerns at all, while they have tyrannized and caused small businesses that have been many of them in Illinois have been around for 100 years, and they have shut the doors, probably to never reopen.
Wow, and you've spoken to some of these business owners, I assume?
Yes, it's devastating. One of the things about where I live, it's very rural, and most of the people where I live don't care what the governor says and don't care what the health department says. And I would guess that where I live, most of the people we have achieved herd immunity just because they can't afford to be locked down. These are hard-working American patriots that know how to work hard, that know how to get things done, that know how to be overcomers. And I know that one of the ways that they have done that is they have tried to practice good health habits like we always do. In any time we've had a flu or any kind of virus has gone around, exercise some common sense, and they have, and we really haven't seen any devastating impact because of the CV-19 virus where we live.
So I understand you have some personal experience with it.
Well, yeah, I actually had COVID-19 it's probably been a month ago now. Actually, my wife and I and several family members had it, but I know that, that we are also friends with several Congress people in Washington, D.C. I know Louis Gohmert talked to him yesterday, and he told me what he did, that he did the hydroxychloroquine, the Z-Pak, the vitamin regimen, the steroid deal, and got over it almost immediately. And I know that that's what I did because my wife had a very asymptomatic experience. Mine wasn't horrible, but I thought, why suffer when they have medications that you can take to do this? And when I did all those things, I got over it almost immediately. Within 24 hours, I was close to back to normal. Where we live, life is pretty normal. In fact, if I didn't turn the TV on, I wouldn't know that there was anything going on.
All right, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you. God bless.
I'm here with John Strand. He's the communications director with America's Frontline Doctors, but they have a new initiative that they just launched that he's going to tell us about. John, welcome.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us about this new initiative.
So this initiative is called LDP Global. LDP stands for Lockdown Protest. And this is simply a universal, apolitical collection of humans coming together to say that we do not consent to tyranny, and specifically, we will not comply with lockdowns anymore.
So what's the thinking behind it?
Well, the thinking behind it's very simple. Lockdowns kill. They are lethal. They don't work. They don't solve problems with disease. Locking down healthy people has literally never been tried before in the history of humankind. Let that sink in. We have never locked down healthy people universally in order to control a disease. Why? Because it's insane. It doesn't work. And what it clearly does do is kill people. Kills jobs, it kills families, it kills people's mindset. And so people are dying by the thousands for a number of reasons that are directly related to the lockdowns that are destroying people's ability to have a life.
So what kind of actions will this organization take?
So we have launched a pilot protest, which we call a flash mob protest. And we launched a pilot action just this last week in front of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's house. The design for this, the idea is to inspire replication across the country and the world for that matter, anywhere that people are interested in preserving liberty and fighting against tyranny and lockdowns. And so right now what we've constructed is just a simple, quick flash mob where people all come together at one time in one place. Right now it's Sunday, 6 p.m. in Los Angeles. That can be constructed at whatever time or place works wherever you are. But all we ask people to do is go to the website and sign up so that we can organize and coordinate everyone in their local city center to execute an LDP action.
I'm here with Jonathan Koppel of the podcast Logic and Common Sense out of Louisiana. Jonathan, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right, so can we just start by you telling me how things are in Louisiana, and I guess specifically New Orleans?
Yeah, so Louisiana is a little nuts right now because of the whole COVID pandemic. The governor's been imposing some strict mandates on the people while he himself is actually going to the Baton Rouge Country Club with his friends with no mask and hanging out, living his best life. New Orleans specifically, it's very restricted right now. The bars are closed. New Orleans thrives on tourism, the restaurant industry, and people think restaurants, they think it's just food. Well, no, you got the bartenders, the waiters, the paper products, all the toilet paper, the napkins, the food distribution centers. So it's a lot of issues we're having in New Orleans. They're not making any money.
The hotels?
The hotels aren't making any money. I met an owner. He's got seven coffee shops, but he's part of the PJ's franchise, Roy Bruno. He's down 90% this year, and he's got 2 coffee shops in the French Quarter. So it's really not good economically. Crime's going up. The police chief was telling us that carjackings are up over 900% since the beginning of this pandemic. So it's really, I want to be hopeful because things can always get better, but right now it's not that great.
My mother was in a nursing home. I began to fight back against the nursing home for neglecting her. They weren't caring for her. I believed they were over-medicating her. I saw signs of neglect on my mother, and I began to speak up, trying to get help for her. And the nursing home wanted to keep me quiet. I was becoming a problem for them. So they hired a law firm that happened to be very connected to the Democratic Party. And one thing led to another, and that law firm actually pursued getting a guardianship for my mother. I thought for sure that this guardian would be the voice of reason, that this would be the person that would advocate for my mom. And this particular guardian never even took the time to learn how to pronounce my mother's name. And she became nothing more than really an extension of the law firm that was looking to litigate and get money from the estate or get money from me or any other way that they could make legal fees.
So what happened next?
So what happened next is the nursing home said that, I owed them a very large bill because I was refusing to pay them because they weren't caring for my mother, and I was hiring private aides and doing what I could to keep her safe. And they ended up, making a call, and I guess they had some friends in the federal government, and next thing you knew, you had a federal prosecutor, and eventually they found $17,000 that they said that they were going to charge me with misappropriating. And, I decided that rather than fighting the federal government, which seemed like it was going to be a witch hunt between, me, my husband's a lawyer, I didn't know what was going to be next. I was scared. I decided that I would take the plea deal. What's the worst that could happen? A $17,000 misdemeanor for somebody that's never been accused of anything. I've never had anything more than a speeding ticket. My lawyers advised me that, chances were I'd get a small probationary term, maybe 6 months of probation, not to worry. And they sentenced me to 30 days in a maximum security prison for misappropriating $17,000 of my mother's Social Security money because they said that money legally should have gone to the nursing home and not to paying to care for my mom. It wasn't my money to convert.
What was your first thought when that sentence came down? I can't even formulate the words now. It was unbelievable. It was, not what my lawyers expected, not what I expected. It was tragic, but also eye-opening. I felt somewhat empowered when I walked out of there that day. And I know that sounds crazy, but I knew that whatever I was doing was making a difference. In some ways, I kind of look at it now like a bucket list item that I've checked off. I tend to be an optimist. I like to, see things on the bright side. And when you're in a moment like that and you're in this dark place, you have to find something to motivate you. So I decided that I would go in there and I would learn as much about the people there as I could. And I really met some of the most interesting human beings that I've ever met in my life. Can you give us a highlight?
I can. I had someone who actually was my concierge while I was in there, and she was the first person that I met, and she gave me my brown washcloth and my soap and my toothbrush, and she was totally different than a lot of the people that I'm friendly with here on the outside, and she was a little scary looking. I mean, she had a face tattoo and some neck tattoos and gold teeth and really long hair, and she was just very, very big and burly and, kind of seemed like she could kick my butt if she wanted to.
What was she in for?
She was actually there for drugs and violence and a gun crime. And a lot of these people that were there were violent criminals. And
Maximum
I
security.
decided, she's going to be my friend. And she was a great person, and she became my friend. I said to her, I need to talk to somebody. Can we talk later? And she kind of looked at me like sure, and later on she goes, I heard about you. I know who you are. And she goes, I heard what they did to your mom. And I said, wow. And she goes, my mom's 80 years old and I'm all she has. And I have one request. When you leave, will you take care of my mom?
Oh.
And at that point, I just my guard was totally down, and I was like, you know what? I want to know who these people are even more, because here you have this person who on the surface was a pretty scary looking person. You seemed was intimidating. You didn't know what to think. You didn't know how she was going to treat you. And here was this compassionate human being that was just worried about my mom as no one, and she's 80 years old and she has cancer, and can you promise me that you'll take care of her? So she kind of became my buddy and my protector, and she goes, who are those people in the hotel that help you when you check in? And I said, the concierge, and she goes, that's what I'm going to be for you. There were a lot of people there that were good to me, and a lot of them were there for scary things. My bunkmate was there for manslaughter.
Wow.
And, she had two personalities. She had one personality that was very combative and scary. And then she also was a big fan of Carrie Underwood and read the Bible and would serenade me with song at night. So, you learn that people are in a lot of ways a product of their environments, and we have a culture of criminality in this country. I learned about people that come from disadvantaged neighborhoods that really aren't given a fair shake in life, that, there's a system that we have in this Bureau of Prisons where they treat these people like a commodity product, and it was eye-opening.
What did you learn about this country that you didn't know?
I learned that we're losing our freedoms more and more every day. And, my parents, I'm a first-generation American. My parents came here from Austria. They escaped the Nazis. My father was 11, my mom was 6, and my father would say to me every single day growing up, you don't know how quickly your freedom can be taken away. You don't know how quickly things could change in this country, and I'm afraid for this country because I see things that are changing. And as he got older in his 70s, and my parents were part of the Democrat Party. My parents were Kennedy Democrats. My parents were Jewish, and they felt that they needed to vote blue. But as my father got older, he started to open his eyes that the party wasn't aligned with the values that he took so seriously. And he realized as a Jewish man that the party was no longer aligned with his ideals. And, communism and socialism are only a step away if we allow these things to creep in. And in 1928, Austria voted for democratic socialism, and that's what destroyed the economy. And that's the reason the Nazis were able to invade. This entire COVID episode has really been a test of socialism in this country, and people need to wake up to the fact that they are being controlled. And when they talk about mandatory vaccinations and giving people papers so they can go to a restaurant or they can go to school, it's very reminiscent of Nazi Austria, and it's very, very scary that that's happening now and people aren't seeing it. But I truly believe that in my father's country, in his home country of Austria, a lot of people didn't see it when it was happening there either, and they ignored it. And that's why 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, is because people didn't see it coming. And it's scary.
I'm the National Field Coordinator for a group called CFACT, the Collegians For a Constructive Tomorrow. We deal with, we provide conservative solutions to environmental problems. The problem with the Paris Climate Accord is that there was one of the major problems with it is that there was no teeth to it. There was no, you can't have a deal where there's no enforcement clause. So it was an arbitrary cap. There was no enforcement clause if something went wrong. In other words, or if you didn't meet the necessary prescriptions for the deal. So that's why, for instance, the United States is the only country that was a signatory to the Paris Climate Accord that met or exceeded the standards set forward by the PCA. Well, so now we look at the deal and you have to say, okay, well, what happens when you don't do that? What happens when none of these countries, none of them came close to meeting the requirements of the Paris Climate Accord? Well, what happens then? Nothing. So, it was an arbitrary way to weaken the United States and weaken our natural resources, weaken our economy, so that Russia and China specifically could grow comparatively against that. Because there was no way that that was going to happen if they came out and said that the U.S. was if Russia and China just were completely it was baked into the cake that they were going to disregard whatever they had to say, whatever the agreement was about the Paris Climate Accord. That just wasn't. They were never going to follow it in the first place. It's placing. My mother worked in prisons for 11 years before she had kids. We joke that she got promoted to warden. It's placing handcuffs on the United States. It restrains the U.S. and it restrains our economy. It's not helpful for our environment, and it's a terrible, terrible piece of legislation.
So now that we've actually seen that it has no teeth and that China and Russia aren't living up to obligations, although they say they do, why do you think there's so much support for going back into it?
Well, people don't really understand the issues. This is what we do at CFACT, right? So our whole goal is we're going to try to educate people as much as possible about the environment. People read the Paris Climate Accord and they say, okay, well, it's going to reduce our carbon emissions. It's going to reduce certain things. Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds great, but like everything else, the devil's in the details. And so as a result, when you look at the fact that there was again, I cannot emphasize this enough, there was no ability to enforce penalties against the countries that did not adhere to the necessary guidelines of the Paris Climate Accord. So when that doesn't happen, then that's when you have a serious problem on your hands. And this is just people don't understand that. People don't, and it's not their fault. People are busy. People don't have time to delve into these issues. They're not nerds like me. They don't research this stuff extensively. And so I think that was the biggest thing, and that's what we try to do at CFACT. We're going across the country right now promoting our campaign. The campaign is called Capitalism is Sustainable. I'm touring the country. I'm speaking on college campuses and state legislature, everywhere I can, right? I'll speak to my mom if I have to, for that.
You should talk to your mother.
I love my mother very much, but that was what I mean. I mean, that's, I'll speak to anybody about this issue. And, the whole point is we're trying to educate people. We're trying to educate people as much as possible about these issues and boil down the complicated issues of the environment into bite-sized pieces so that people can understand it and make informed decisions.
All right, so give me the number one sort of myth that people would bring to you that you feel myth that you have to dispel, or the number one misunderstanding that people have.
Well, I work a lot on college campuses, right? And that's sort of the majority of what I do. And it's really crazy because I'll give a speech and then I open it up for the question and answer period, and people start to ask all these questions, and it's I get questions from my mom and from my dad and from people who I talk to regularly. They're like, well, what happens when a kid comes up and he's feeling crazy? I say, I feel sorry for him, because most of the time these kids are scared. And so the biggest myth that I get is that the world's going to end in 12 years if we don't wind up enacting the Green New Deal right now. That's probably the biggest one.
And so how do you answer them?
Well, you answer them by saying there's just no scientific data to back that. There's just no scientific data to say that, if you want to run around, and ultimately at the end of the day, people have agency over themselves, and if they want to run around and say that, run out the building like Chicken Little and say that the sky is falling, then, at some point you can't control them. But you just have to say, listen, where's the evidence? Where's the data? Where's the backing behind that claim? They don't have it. And that's when things start to get calm, and you can say, listen, we all want to make the world a better place. We all want to make the climate, we all want to make Earth cleaner. We want to keep our animals happy and healthy and safe. But there's a way to do this without jamming down the jackboot of government on businesses' necks. And that's our whole goal at CFACT.
All right, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I, like most reasonable people concerned with American interests, I think that China is a great threat to our national security interests, but at the same time, I'm somewhat concerned by the way the issue is framed on the right. I think ultimately the threat of China, the problem of China, redounds to the problem with the American ruling class, and that actually one needs to fix the American ruling class before one can seriously address the problem of China. And I think keeping the focus specifically and primarily on China sort of tends to obscure that fact. And I think we're never going to get anything done until we fix the fact that our own ruling class is corrupt, incompetent, and to a large degree illegitimate.
So do you think the issue with the ruling class is just that they've bought into some of the China, or I should say Chinese Communist Party, stories? Or, I mean, this database was recently leaked with, thousands of people who are actually compromised by the CCP,
Right.
working for the CCP. How much do you think that's the factor?
I mean, that is a factor, but it's actually quite weak to think of how easily our managerial elite can be compromised by China. It's really more of an indictment of our elite than it is of China. I mean, China is a competitor, it's a rival. They're doing what's in their own best interest from the standpoint of the Chinese government. It's our own people who are selling out for an embarrassingly low price, by the way, who really are to blame. And I think that particular method of framing, I think, is very powerful and it's more accurate, and is what really President Trump did. He said, look, we can't blame China for trying to take advantage of us. That's what any country would do. We blame our own stupid and corrupt leaders for allowing it to happen. And as long as we have stupid and corrupt ruling class in this country, China's going to take advantage of us, and if it's not China, it's going to be some other country. And so we really have to fix that problem internally, clean house internally, before we're in a serious position to compete with China on the global stage for preeminence in the 21st century.
So how do you see going about that fix, considering how deep the influence already is, clearly?
Well, that's a very difficult question. I think it starts with being able to identify and frame the problem correctly. I think in some ways a lot of our corrupt ruling class loves the idea of people simply pointing fingers at China because it deflects from their own corruption and incompetence. As long as we're talking about how evil the CCP is, we're not talking about how malicious and incompetent our own ruling class is. So I think Americans, and particularly conservative Americans who still have a kind of reflexive deference to our own national security establishment, need to understand that one of the most devastating developments of the Trump era has been the fact that large swaths of our own American national security apparatus have been repurposed and redeployed domestically in order to crush the energies associated with Donald Trump's victory. And so just as much as we critique the CCP, we have to critique our own institutions, the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ, the State Department, and our own big tech companies, which have been instrumental in effecting a kind of censorship regime internally of the sort that's beginning to look disturbingly close to what they have in China. And so in order to be competitive with China in the future, we have to be attentive to the fact that we need to preserve our own moral high ground. And we can't do that with a corrupt elite and with big tech companies that are censoring our own citizens, imprisoning journalists like Julian Assange and so forth. We simply cannot relinquish the moral high ground and hope to be able to prosecute this long-term struggle with respect to China and win the 21st century.
That's all for tonight's show. Be sure to catch us in our new time slot. That's every Saturday morning from 11 a.m. to noon Eastern. Thanks for watching and have a Happy New Year.